So now that you understand that the real money is not in the flashy AI applications but in the picks and shovels of this entire revolution, let me actually walk you through how this system works step by step, because this is where most people fail. They hear the idea, they get excited, but they don't know how to apply it, and without application, this is completely useless. So what I'm going to do right now is break down the exact layers of this AI ecosystem, just like I did with Palantir back in the day when nobody wanted to touch it. And I'm going to show you where the real opportunities are sitting right now in plain sight, but completely ignored by the majority of retail investors, because they are simply not trained to look there. They are trained to follow headlines. They are trained to chase hype. And that is exactly why they miss these opportunities over and over again. So let's start from the ground level, the physical infrastructure, because everything begins there. And I want you to think about this like land, like real estate, like the roads and highways that everything else depends on. Because no matter who wins the AI race, no matter which company builds the best chatbot, the best application, the best tool, they all have to run somewhere. They all need servers, they all need storage, they all need compute power, and that is controlled by a handful of companies that basically own the digital world. We're talking about Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and Oracle, and these companies don't care who wins the AI war. They don't care about hype cycles, because every single player in this space is paying them, and that is the beauty of this layer. It is completely agnostic. It benefits from everyone. And if you look at the numbers, the margins are expanding, the revenues are exploding, and the demand is not slowing down. In fact, it is accelerating, which means these companies are going to continue printing money regardless of what happens at the application level. Now let's move one level up to the compute layer, because this is where the real engine sits. This is where everything actually happens. And if you don't have compute, you don't have AI. It's that simple. And this layer is dominated by a very small number of companies that have built an insane competitive advantage. We're talking about Nvidia and advanced micro devices on the GPU side. And then you have Taiwan Semiconductor manufacturing company, which actually manufactures these chips. And on top of that, you have ASML, which builds the machines that make these chips possible. And this is where it gets crazy, because ASML is basically a monopoly. TSMC is basically a monopoly. Nvidia is close to a monopoly. And even AMD is number 2, is making a ton of money, which tells you how big this market actually is. And despite all of this, people still think it's too late, which is honestly insane, because the demand for compute is only getting started. We are still in the early innings of this AI boom, and these companies are going to be at the center of it for years to come. Now, right next to compute, you have networking, which is something most people completely ignore because it's not sexy, it's not exciting, but it is absolutely critical, because all these machines need to talk to each other. They need to transfer massive amounts of data at insane speeds. And that is where companies like Arista Networks come in, building the switches, the routers, the entire communication system of these data centers. And this is a business that is growing like crazy with insane margins, strong balance sheets, and almost no debt. And yet nobody talks about it because it's not flashy. And that is exactly why the opportunity exists. Now let's talk about one of the biggest bottlenecks in AI right now, which is power and cooling. Because all this compute power consumes insane amounts of electricity and generates massive heat. And without solving this problem, the entire system collapses. And this is where companies like Constellation Energy, Bloom Energy, and Vertiv come into play. And this is not a small problem. This is a massive constraint that the entire industry is facing right now, which means the companies that solve it are going to make a lot of money. Now moving forward, we have the data layer, which is essentially the fuel of AI, because without high-quality data, nothing works, your models fail, your predictions are useless, and your entire system breaks down. And this is where companies like Mungod and again Oracle dominate, managing and organizing the data that powers everything. Now on top of that we have the control layer, which is the brain, the operating system that actually makes AI usable for businesses. And this is where Palantir Technologies comes in. And this is a company that people love to doubt. They love to hate. But every single time they doubt it, they end up being wrong because they don't understand what it actually does. And that is exactly why it continues to outperform. Now alongside that we have the observation layer, which is basically the monitoring system, making sure everything runs smoothly, detecting issues, optimizing performance, and this is where Datadog dominates. And finally we have the security layer, which is non-negotiable, because in a world where everything is digital, one breach can destroy a company, and this is where CrowdStrike and Scala come in, protecting the entire ecosystem. And now when you step back and look at this entire structure, what you realize is that this is not about one stock. This is not about chasing hype. This is about building a system, taking the best companies from each of these layers and building a portfolio that is positioned to benefit from the entire AI revolution, not just one part of it. And this is exactly how you create real wealth, not by guessing, not by gambling, but by understanding, by building conviction, and by sticking to your strategy no matter what the market throws at you. Because at the end of the day, the people who win are not the ones who react the fastest. They are the ones who stay consistent the longest. Now here's the part that most people are not going to like, but it needs to be said because this is where the real difference between winners and losers is created, and it has nothing to do with which stock you pick and everything to do with how you behave after you pick it. Because let's be honest, information today is not the problem. Everybody has access to the same data, the same charts, the same news, the same analysis, but very few people actually turn that information into a repeatable system. And without a system you are just reacting, you are guessing, you are gambling. And that is exactly why most retail investors underperform, because they jump from one idea to another. They get excited when things go up. They panic when things go down, and they never give their investments enough time to actually play out. And this is especially important in a cycle like AI where volatility is going to be part of the journey. These stocks are not going to go up in a straight line. They are going to have pullbacks. They are going to have corrections. They are going to have periods when nothing seems to be happening. And in those moments your conviction is going to be tested. And if you build your portfolio based on hype or based on someone else's opinion, you are going to fold. You are going to sell at the worst possible time. And then you are going to watch those same stocks recover and go higher without you. And this cycle repeats over and over again. And the only way to break it is to actually understand what you own and why you own it. Because when you understand the business, when you understand the layer it operates in, when you understand the demand behind it, short-term price movements stop mattering. They become noise. And you start thinking like an owner instead of a trader. And that is a completely different mindset. Because now you are not asking should I sell because the stock is down 10%. You are asking, has anything fundamentally changed in the business? Has the long-term thesis broken? And most of the time the answer is no. But the market will try to convince you otherwise. The market will shake you out. It will test your patience. And that is why having a clear plan from the beginning is so important. You need to know your allocation. You need to know how much you are willing to invest in each layer. You need to know when you are going to add, when you are going to trim, and when you are simply going to do nothing. Because doing nothing is often the hardest but most profitable decision you can make. And this is where most people fail because they feel the need to constantly act. They think activity equals progress. But in investing that is not true. In fact, overactivity is often what destroys returns. Because every time you jump in and out of positions, you are increasing your chances of making a mistake. You are letting emotions drive your decisions. And you are breaking the compounding process. And compounding is the entire game. This is not about making a quick 20%. This is about positioning yourself in companies that can grow for years and letting that growth multiply your capital over time. And when you look at the companies we talked about across these layers, the common theme is very clear. They are all leaders in their space. They all have strong demand tailwinds, and they are all critical to the AI ecosystem, which means they are not going away anytime soon. And that is exactly the type of businesses you want to own. Businesses that are not easily replaceable. Businesses that benefit from long-term trends. And businesses that continue to grow regardless of short-term noise. And this is why the idea that it's too late is completely flawed. Because people always say this. They said it about the internet. They said it about smartphones. They said it about cloud computing. And they are saying it again about AI. But what they don't understand is that these trends play out over many years, not months. And the biggest gains are often made after the initial hype phase, when the real adoption starts happening. And that is exactly where we are right now. We are moving from hype to implementation, from experimentation to integration, and that is where the infrastructure gets pushed to its limits. That is where demand explodes, and that is where these picks and shovels companies really start to shine. And if you are positioned correctly during this phase, the upside can be massive. But again, it comes back to discipline. It comes back to having a system and sticking to it, because the market is not going to make it easy for you. It never does. It will create doubt. It will create fear. It will create uncertainty. And in those moments, you have two choices. You either trust your process or you abandon it. And the people who abandon it are the ones who miss out. They are the ones who keep starting over, chasing the next opportunity, never giving anything enough time to work. And that is why they stay stuck. While the people who stay consistent, who stay patient, who keep executing their plan, are the ones who eventually pull ahead. And it doesn't happen overnight. It happens gradually, and then suddenly. And that is the beauty of compounding. It feels slow in the beginning, but once it starts accelerating, it becomes very powerful. And that is exactly what you are positioning yourself for here. Not a quick win, but a long-term shift in your financial trajectory. And if you take this seriously, if you actually apply this framework, build your portfolio across these layers, and stick with it, you are giving yourself a real shot at capturing one of the biggest opportunities of this decade, but only if you act on it, because at the end of the day, none of this matters if you don't execute. Ideas don't make money, actions do. And the difference between someone who watches this and someone who benefits from it is simply whether they decide to take that next step and actually implement what they just learned.